In this video, I'm going to be going over exactly how I would generate an extra $40 million for one of the largest and most influential clothing brands in the entire world, all through email marketing. This is what the smartest brands in 2026 are doing in order to capture more of their ad traffic and ad spend, as well as cut through all the noise and competition that exists today in 2026. So with that being said, I'm going to hop over to Figma so I can walk through Gap's email marketing strategy that exists today and currently how I would optimize it. So now first walking through some of the estimates just to give you a rough idea of how I got these numbers and how you can compare it to your brand as well, because they're probably all thinking, how in the heck is he going to do that? So just to preface, these are pretty conservative for a brand doing anywhere from $100,000 a month all the way up to $5 to $10 million a month. I think these jumps would be a bit larger, but just because of the great size of Gap, I was pretty conservative here. So looking at their monthly visitors for their US store, they get about 96.2 million visitors every single month. And I would venture to guess, like I said, I don't have their numbers, but I'm guessing their pop-up, for example, is performing around 4%, which is pretty average. We typically like to be all the way up to 8 to 10%. And then let's also estimate that their welcome flow conversion is currently 5% right now, and their average order value is $50. That would lead them to $9.62 million in revenue from their welcome flow every single month. So in order to optimize that, and what I'm going to walk through next, these are sort of the numbers that we would come to. So we would increase their pop-up form by 1%. Typically, like I said, we would want to be like 8 to 10%. So for a brand doing anywhere from, like I said, $100,000 a month all the way up to 10 million, it should be around 8 to 10. And then welcome flow conversions, we want to be around 5.5%. So increase that there by 0.5%. Still the same average order value. That would get us to $13.2 million per month, an extra $3 million every single month, and $43 million a year. So let's rate that out a full calendar year. That would get us to that number just by optimizing two things, and that is their pop-up form and their welcome flow. And I'm going to walk through now what they have and exactly how I would improve it. So first, walking through their pop-up form, which is such a critical piece to email marketing because a lot of it is a numbers game. We want to be having new leads and generating new email subscribers every single day at a faster pace. So instead of getting 10,000 a day, we want to get 20,000. That's why it's so important. And right now, there are just a lot of principles here that are preventing it from performing at its best ability. So first of all, they have a pretty solid offer. They have 15% off, which is pretty large as well. A lot of times I will see brands that put it super small, which you don't want to do because we want to make it the focal point of the pop-up form because that's ultimately what's going to get someone to convert. However, they don't use a micro commit, which are super, super important and get a lot more conversions because people will just see something that says claim discount. They'll see a button. They won't actually see the email address block yet. And they'll say, I'll claim my 15% off. And then on the next step, that's where you introduce the email block. And people will be like, oh, what the heck, might as well put my email address in. It works with psychology. People want to follow through with an action they already started. They're already one step down the funnel. So a lot more people will ultimately give away their email address. So that's what I would recommend doing for them. I would also recommend adding some sort of question, which is going to affect the welcome flow conversion, which I'll get into after the pop-up, because we want to gather more information on what the customer is looking for. There are a ton of products and categories, collections that someone could buy from Gap. So we want to cater that experience to that specific customer and whatever they're looking for. That's really, really important. Another small tweak that I would make, this is more, you couldn't do it, but I usually see a percent bump, is move the X to the top left-hand corner, especially on mobile because most people are left-handed, which means they're going to have to go to the top left-hand corner to actually exit out. So more than likely, they're just going to opt in and put their email address in. So that's what I would recommend doing for Gap, and it is ultimately what's going to get them from that 4 to 5% conversion. And so just so you guys get an idea, here is the redesigned option, redesigned pop-up of what we have for Gap. So right now you've got 15% off, super big, super legible. You can see it right away. And then they go into asking, who are you shopping for today? Very, very important step that I'm going to get into. Like I said, for the welcome flow, are you shopping for men or are you shopping for women? Now we can gather information on what exactly they're looking for. And we can even add a question that says both, or maybe kids, because they do have a kids department. But a lot more people are going to click right off the bat. Say for myself, I'm gonna be shopping for men. I'll click that, and then I'd be prompted with the email address. At the end of this video as well, so if you made it this far, you've got a good little ending tidbit that I'm gonna walk through as well, which goes into the offer, but I'm gonna get into that last. But this is what a super high performing pop-up form looks like and what you'd want to implement for your brand. Next, I'm going to go back to the email. So this is what I got, and there are a lot of things that I don't like about this email. First of all, there is not a high call to action. So when someone opens this, they just see welcome to Gap in this model. They don't actually see a button until right there, which really isn't even a button. It's an underlined start shopping copy. So there's really nothing telling me besides these buttons, which I don't love off the bat, really, just because it can sort of distract from the main thing we want the customer to look at, which is their code down here. So this is sort of just distracting, really just brings down the copy and the image. So I don't love doing that. I wouldn't recommend it. You could test it though. And then as far as the code, it's also pretty small, so you can't really see it. So you can't see it until you scroll down below the fold. It's also just very small. So we want to make sure that's very big and very clear to every customer who sees this email that they're going to get that code and they can use it very seamlessly. That's really the most important part because that's what most people are looking for. But the other thing that we want to do is start to segment based on what question they answered in the pop-up form. So right now, for example, I always like to default like, what would I think if I was coming as a customer to Gap? So I see potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blocks or nudges that don't really apply to me. I'm not saying this is going for everyone, but this is why it's important to sort of ask a question in the pop-up form, because I'm looking for men's clothing. So it's very important to start to segment this email towards what a man would potentially buy. Same for females. So if there is a question on the pop-up form that says I'm looking for, female clothing, great. Now we can cater this email more towards that demographic. Say it's all of the above, great. Then we could leave something like this because they don't necessarily know. Maybe they're shopping for their kids, their husband, themselves. We don't know, and that's totally fine. But we want to try to segment as best we can towards what the customer is actually looking for. Now going over the redesigned version that I did for them, and before we even go into the segmenting that we will use from the pop-up form, just looking at the conversion principles. So we have a much higher call to action. We see the code immediately. We know exactly what it is. We could also make it dynamic like they did, where they had like XY24, where it's new for every customer, but just for the sake of the video, I did welcome 15. We have this nice shop bestsellers real high. That is really what's going to elevate it, even without doing all of the other segmentation that we have at the bottom. So that's what I would recommend for them doing immediately. And as you can see here, so for example, I click men. Now we want to segment the clothing items that would best fit me or best fit whoever's shopping for men's clothing. You do the same for women's. You would do the same for if there is a toddler's button, a kid's button. If there was an all of the above button, then we would have an email for customers looking for all these collections. But we want to give more opportunities of a sale based on what they're actually going to be buying. So we have a heavyweight t-shirt, a Henley, trousers, or trouser jeans, and then baggy khakis. And then we also have individual shop now buttons here, which is something that they did not have and causes friction. So not everybody's going to realize that they can just click this and be brought to the website. We want to make sure there's individual shop now buttons here to make it real easy for someone to click it and then buy on the site. Really, email marketing comes down to getting people to go from your email in an inbox to your website to make the purchase. So that's what we want to do here. And then we also have shop by collections because, for example, maybe I went through this, nothing really caught my eye. We can only put so many products on an email, so we still want to be a bit broad here. And you can also switch these. So if you wanted to test, maybe it works better if we put collections here and then core products here. That's a great test to run. But here we have shop by collection. Maybe it's tees, jeans, shirts, shorts, and maybe I'm more interested in shorts because it's warm, it's summer. Now you're still giving them an opportunity to shop there. And then like always, we want to have main navigation buttons at the bottom. So maybe I went through that entire email, nothing caught my eye. I still want to shop men's, or maybe I want to shop women's for, family member, girlfriend, whatever it may be. You can still do that there. And that's why it's important to have those as well. So just with those changes, these are small tweaks that really make a huge difference in the way someone thinks and the way someone will ultimately buy. Like just myself, like I said, you always want to default to, if you were a customer, how would you react? And if I saw an email much more catered to what I was looking for, I'd be much more receptive to actually buying. So in total, here is the comparisons, the comparison emails. Let me pull these over if Figma will cooperate. So yeah, here you can see a pretty substantial difference where this was there before. The after also just looks much more aesthetically pleasing and accurate to their site. And then the two new email, or the old email and the new email, the two emails put together, high call to action, buttons, more catered, more segmented, giving more reasons for someone to buy. So with these small changes, you can really make a big impact on how many people buy and how much new customers, new acquisition you can get. But another thing that you can do, which can really change your brand, is offer test. So instead of doing 15% off here, you could offer test, say, $10 off. You could offer test $15 off. You could offer test a free gift, a free bundle, a combination. You could do a mystery discount. You could do exclusive discount. You can frame the same value of this 15% off in plenty of different ways. And that's ultimately going to do a lot more actually than even these segmenting changes. It's just by changing your offer and by testing your offer. So after all of this, and after you see the changes, then I would go in here, or even before, and say, okay, what offer resonates best with your customers? This is why you see a lot of the fastest growing brands, IM8, Grunz, plenty more, who give crazy offers like 50% off plus free gifts. You don't have to quite go that far, but it sort of plays into, this is why it's so important to have a great offer. And like I just said, you don't have to go quite that high, but if you're able to frame a really good sounding offer, whatever that means for your brand, you will get a lot more acquisition and a lot more customers. So yeah, that is ultimately how I would drive an extra $40 million for Gap's brand through email marketing, and how you can do the exact same through offer testing, through segmenting, through having a higher performing pop-up form and a higher performing welcome flow email. So you can get a lot more customers every single day. But I hope you all got some value from it, and until next time.